At first, I thought it was just a bag of trash, a dark lump, motionless on the blacktop of an industrial lot in Baytown, Texas. People dumped garbage here all the time. Nothing unusual about that. But as I stepped closer, my heart faltered. It wasn't trash. It was a puppy. A tiny Doberman, no more than 4 months old, was glued to a slab of thick, tar-black asphalt. The sleek black and tan coat that should have gleamed now clumped in filthy patches. Every time it tried to shift, I heard the skin tear away, pink flesh opening beneath. The sight stole the air from my throat. Its eyes were wide, clouded with despair. Brown irises that once held a sky now drowned in shadow. It no longer had the strength to howl or bark. Only small, rasping whimpers drifted out, the sound of a life nearly spent. Someone told me it had been stuck there for 2 days. 2 days under the Texas sun, cooked by pavement still hot from the mixer's last load. Its cries had echoed through the yard. Dozens of people walked past. They heard, they glanced, and then they turned away. They kept eating, kept working, kept living, and this puppy stayed behind in its private hell. I dropped to my knees, my heart pounding against my ribs. The sharp stink of tar rose up, mixing with the burnt fur reek and the thin iron scent of blood seeping from peeled skin. My eyes blurred. It was so small, so defenseless. A living thing no one had defended, treated as if it were a piece of trash. For a heartbeat, it looked straight at me. No words, just a stare that shook me to the core. In those eyes I saw the question. Would I leave, like everyone else? I couldn't. I gripped the chain-link fence and yelled toward the guard shack. "Hey! There's a puppy stuck in the asphalt! Open the gate!" He hesitated, his eyes dull. My voice cracked as I shouted again. "If you don't open it, I'm calling the police. This is animal cruelty, and I'm not walking away." Finally, the gate clanged open. I sprinted to the puppy. Its ears flattened, its body trembling, but its eyes clung to me like a single thread keeping it here. I dropped to the ground, tears spilling. I whispered the way you do to a frightened child. "It's okay, baby. I'm here. I'm not leaving you." I held a bottle of water to its mouth. It licked weakly, its throat quivering as it swallowed each drop. My hands shook as I opened a small bottle of mineral oil, drizzling it over the black crust strangling its chest and armpits. Every touch made it hiss softly, then go still again, as if it understood that this pain was a step toward freedom. And then, as I tried to peel back a strip of tar, I nearly gagged. A whole patch of skin came off with it. Blood welled up, turning the tar darker still. The puppy jerked, a sharp cry breaking from its throat. I started to sob, my choking sounds echoing across the cold industrial yard. One thought burned through me. It cannot die here. Not like this. I wrapped it in the towel I'd brought and lifted its weightless, bony frame from the black pit. It felt like carrying a soaked coat. I could hear its shallow, staccato breaths against my chest. As I ran to the car, I glanced back at the gaping hole of asphalt. It looked like a wound in the earth, ready to swallow anything unlucky enough to fall in. But today, at least, one life had been pulled out of the dark. I shut the car door, tucking the towel tighter around its body. My hands trembled as I spoke the name aloud. "Your Scout. I promise you, from now on, you'll never fight alone again." I burst into Whitaker Animal Clinic under a thin drizzle. The bell over the door jingled and my voice cracked as I shouted, "Please, there's a puppy stuck in tar." "He's alive, but barely." Dr. Amelia Whitaker, silver hair pulled low at her neck, stepped out from the hallway. She didn't waste words, just gave a sharp nod. "Table 2. Hurry." I laid Scout down. His body barely stirred, eyes glazed and unblinking, chest shivering in uneven waves. His fur, hardened into stiff black clumps, had turned him into a distorted shape. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from breaking in front of them. The doctor slid in a pain injection, and with her tech, Marco, began the work. Marco reached for the blunt-tipped scissors, and I cradled Scout's head, whispering into his ear, "Listen, little one, I'm here. Don't give up." They started peeling away the tar. Mineral oil slicked across the hardened patches. Each time they lifted, the sound ripped through the room, like duct tape tearing from skin, and with it came strips of flesh, bright blood mixing with black tar, a stench that burned the back of my throat. Scout whimpered, body jerking, then collapsed again. My throat closed. Tears spilled onto his cheek. I couldn't stop shaking as I watched each patch of his skin stripped away. 4 months old, and already enduring a torture no creature should ever know. At times, Marco had to take a scalpel, sliding it delicately under the hardened crust, separating skin from tar millimeter by millimeter. I couldn't look for long, but Scout's eyes forced me to stay steady. He wasn't crying much anymore, just staring at me, begging without words. "Don't leave me. Don't leave like the others." They readied a steel tub, warm water mixed with oil. When we lowered him in, Scout hissed, a weak cry escaping. Black foam spread across the surface as the tar loosened, slow as melting rubber. The bitter smell climbed into my head. I knelt by the rim, pressing my hand against his skull, whispering nonstop, "You're okay. You're gonna be okay. I promise." Time dragged heavily. The room filled only with the scrape of blades, the trickle of water, and the hammer of my heart. Each large patch that came free revealed raw, blistered skin, angry red, swollen, some oozing. Dr. Whitaker shook her head once, but her hands never stopped. By the time his upper body was cleared, I could see how thin he was. Nothing but bones wrapped in torn hide. Ribs sticking sharp under the amber light. Belly caved in, legs trembling. And still, his eyes clung to me. Then, out of nowhere, Scout stiffened, dragged in a long breath, and vomited up a stream of thick black fluid. The room froze. The stench of burnt tar and bile hit like a wave. Whitaker bent low in an instant, suctioning his airway and setting another IV line. I held his head as his frail body convulsed in my arms. "Good," the doctor murmured. "His body's pushing the toxins out." But my chest refused to calm. I broke down, sobbing like a child, not out of disgust, but out of love, out of grief for the way he still clung to life, even as his body was being torn apart. That night I sat by the warming kennel, eyes wide open, refusing sleep. Scout lay inside, lids half closed, breaths shallow, chest rising in fragile rhythm. Every time he shivered, I placed my hand over his tiny ribcage, whispering, "Don't leave me. Don't go. You're not alone anymore." In the dim, amber glow of the on-call room, one truth settled over me. From the moment I saw him lying in that pit of tar, his fate and mine had fused. I wasn't a bystander anymore. I was the thread he held on to, the one that had to carry him through the night. That night was the longest of my life. I sat in a plastic chair pressed against the warming kennel, watching Scout breathe in short, shallow bursts, listening to the IV drip fall in steady ticks. Each drop felt like a clock counting down his life. His tiny body trembled with seizures, skin raw and burning, patches where the tar had stolen his fur and flesh. I saw him curl into himself, every nerve screaming. And then, Suddenly, a sound that stopped my heart. A choking gurgle in his throat, followed by a stream of thick, black liquid. I shot to my feet, lifting his head, hands shaking as I supported his neck. Whitaker and Marco rushed in. She brought the suction tube, and Marco pinned his frail frame steady. My own voice cracked over and over, nothing but the same plea. "Don't go. Please, don't go." The tar-thick sludge poured out, its acrid stench hitting hard, filling my head. Scout shuddered, his whole body close to collapsing. But then, when the wave of vomiting eased, he gasped in a ragged breath, and the sound of it made my tears break free because it meant he was still here, still fighting. Time crawled in agony. Every hour, another round, sometimes just blackened froth, sometimes heavier clots that made me want to scream at my own helplessness. But Dr. Whitaker stayed calm. She laid a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "This is his body purging the poison. As long as he vomits, as long as he reacts, there's a chance." I clung to her words like a life raft. I wiped his mouth each time gently, again and again. Each time his eyes cracked open, I bent low so mine were the first thing he saw. Those eyes were still clouded, but deep down, I knew he felt me there. Around 2 a.m, Scout convulsed hard. I cried out for the doctor. She checked his pulse, her face shadowed with concern. "Fever's spiking. 103.8, she murmured. My head swam, but she moved quickly, cooling him, easing his pain. Marco adjusted the line, sweat dripping from his brow. The room felt frozen in those minutes. Outside, rain hammered the windows, each drop pounding like a frantic heartbeat. Scout lay still, chest rising weakly. I leaned close, whispering into his ear, "I know you're hurting, but don't leave me. If you fight, I'll stay." Every minute, every second I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my head against the kennel, tracking every fragile breath. Each pause felt like the end. Each return, a flicker of light in the darkness inside me. Toward dawn, Scout grew too weak to whimper. His eyes were only half closed, drifting. I laid my palm on his chest and felt the faintest thump of a heart still fighting. My tears fell onto the blanket, soaking into faint, blurry stains. I don't know how many times I whispered, "Don't leave me." I don't know how many times I held my breath, waiting to see if his chest would rise again. I only knew that every breath he drew had become the single thread tying me to this world. And when the first pale light slipped through the blinds, Scout was still alive. Battered, fragile, near broken, but alive. I broke down, sobbing openly, not from relief but from awe. Because through a night that felt like hell itself, he hadn't let go. I lifted my head and stared through the fogged glass. The sky outside was still gray, but inside me, something glowed. The longest night had passed, and he was still here. That morning I opened my eyes after a sleepless night, my body hollowed out, drained to the bone. But Scout was still breathing. Each rise and fall of his chest was faint, like a candle guttering in the wind. But the flame had not gone out. Dr. Whitaker stepped in quietly, checking him with practiced hands. She pinched the pad of his hind paw. I held my breath. At first, nothing. Then, a faint twitch, so small it could have been missed if you weren't looking for it. My eyes blurred with tears. "There's reflex," she said, her voice low but firm. "Fragile, but present." It was the first time I dared to believe Scout might survive. I sat by his kennel, coaxing a spoon of soft food toward his lips. My hands shook, terrified he would refuse. But he licked slow and uncertain, then swallowed. One spoonful, then another. He didn't vomit. Right there, I broke, covering my face, sobbing like a child. In that room filled with antiseptics, my cries mingled with the steady drip of the IV, forming a fragile but living kind of music. The rest of the day, I drifted between despair and hope. Every twitch of Scout's body made my heart clench. Every still moment had me gripping the chair, bracing for the worst. By afternoon, Marco brought a special visitor, a golden retriever named Sunny, owned by one of the techs. Sunny was so gentle that he seemed to radiate light. He padded up to Scout's kennel, sniffed softly through the bars. Scout opened his eyes, staring intently, then inched his nose upward to touch. Just a small gesture, but the entire room seemed to hold its breath. In those brown eyes, I caught something beyond pain. Curiosity. A spark. The tiniest flicker of life. I clung to it as if it were proof Scout had chosen to stay. By evening, the fever lingered but had eased slightly. Scout slept, his breathing still heavy but steadier. I sat with my hand pressed against the cage, remembering the moment in that asphalt lot, the hopeless stare that had crushed me. And now, those eyes were not entirely empty anymore. Dr. Whitaker told me softly, "He's still on the edge. At any moment, he could crash. But if he survives the first 72 hours, his chances rise sharply." Her words looped in my head like a mantra. 72 hours. Just hold on, and we might have a real chance. That night, I stayed awake again, but it wasn't the same kind of despair as the night before. This time, there was something else in the air. Each time Scout stirred or whimpered, I bent close, whispering, "Listen, little one, you're not alone. You've got me. You've got a whole world waiting to see you stand again." Near 3 a.m, Scout opened his eyes. He didn't look around the room. He looked at me. I pressed my finger to the bars. He was too weak to lift his head, but his tongue slipped out, brushing my skin. Such a small gesture, but it shattered me. I broke down, sobbing, unable to stop. In that moment, I understood. He had chosen to fight. On the 3rd day, the clinic brought Scout a gift. A tiny 2-wheeled cart designed for dogs who couldn't use their back legs. Marco wheeled the steel frame in, the black wheels still gleaming with newness. I stared at it, a lump tightening in my chest. Never had I imagined a 4-month-old puppy would have to learn to walk with machines. Dr. Whitaker explained, "We need to let him try. If his body still has some strength, early movement can stimulate the nervous system, give him a chance to recover. But it must be gentle." Never forced, I nodded, my pulse racing. I lifted Scout from the kennel. He felt as light as a pillow, his body still smelling faintly of mineral oil, raw wounds lining his ribs. When I set him down near the cart, he stared at the strange contraption, ears folded back, eyes flickering with unease. "It's okay, little one," I whispered, running a hand down his fragile spine. "Just a try." "I'm right here," Marco and I slid the straps gently around his belly. Scout whimpered, his legs trembling. I could feel the fear in him, and it pierced me. I bent close so he could see my eyes. "Listen, you don't have to do anything alone anymore." We lifted him carefully, settling his hind legs into the frame. For a few seconds, he froze, eyes wide. The wheels quivered under his slight weight. I held the strap at his chest, steadying him. "Come on, Scout." "Try." I held out a piece of soft food in front of his nose. He stared, hesitated, then moved one front paw forward. The wheels rolled, creaking softly against the vinyl floor. I held my breath. Another step, then another. The room fell silent. And then I saw it. His tail. It twitched. Just barely. Just enough. But it was enough to break me. I burst into tears, laughing and crying at once. Marco grinned widely, clapping me on the shoulder. The whole room seemed to brighten. Scout shuffled forward, rolling awkwardly, clumsy but determined. And in those brown eyes, for the first time since it all began, I saw something different. Not just pain, not just fear, but life. "Good boy, little one," I choked out. "You did it." Sonny, the gentle golden retriever, padded in just then. He circled Scout with calm curiosity, as if welcoming a friend. Scout paused, lifted his nose, and touched Sonny gently. It was a small moment, but I knew. It was the first time Scout felt he wasn't alone. Dr. Whitaker nodded, the faintest smile breaking her stern face. "That's a big step. He's chosen to move forward." That night, I stayed beside Scout again. He lay in the warming kennel, breathing steadier, his eyes half-lidded. I thought back to that asphalt pit, when he lay motionless, discarded like trash. And now, just 3 days later, I had seen his tail move. I pressed my hand to the bars and whispered, "I promise, this is only the beginning. One day, you'll run on legs, on wheels, or with nothing but will. But you'll run, and I'll be there watching." In the dark of the on-call room, I heard the wind press against the window. But inside me, something had shifted. It was no longer all fear. Amid the wounds, amid the tar and blood, something fragile but fierce had appeared. Hope. In the days that followed, I began to believe in something I'd only ever heard whispered before. Miracles. Not the kind that explodes in a single flash, but the quiet kind. Growing slowly, breath by breath, step by step. Scout was living proof. On the 4th morning, when I opened the clinic door, Scout lifted his head to wait for me. No longer the hollow stare of those first hours. Instead, brown eyes blinked at me, brighter, searching. I crouched low, slid my hand through the bars, and he pressed his nose into my palm. Such a small gesture. Yet it set my heart on fire. He had started to believe he wasn't abandoned anymore. We began rehab, gentle muscle massage, low-dose laser treatments along the spine, and even a veterinary acupuncturist who came to help. Scout flinched sometimes, whimpered at others, but I could tell he wasn't afraid the way he once was. After each session, he'd glance up at me as if to ask, did I do well? And every time I'd nod, my throat would tighten. Good boy, little one. On the 5th day, the miracle arrived. While I steadied the harness for him to try walking, Scout suddenly shifted a fraction of his weight onto his back legs. Not much, just enough to bear part of himself. But it was real. I shouted for Marco and the doctor. The 3 of us stood frozen, choked by the sight. Scout panted, exhausted, but his eyes shone as if to say, I haven't given up. That evening, I recorded a short clip of his therapy and posted it in a local rescue group. I thought little of it, just wanted to share a small joy. But within hours, the video had spread hundreds of times. Comments poured in. We're praying for him. Little warrior, you've got this. How could anyone abandon a soul this brave? That night, I sat by his kennel, reading every comment aloud as if he understood. Each word felt like an embrace from strangers whose hearts had already made space for him. I read and cried, my tears dripping onto the floor. On the 6th day, a group of high school students stopped by, bringing toys and blankets. They sat around Scout, telling him their little stories, while he lay there, eyes half closed, tail flicking lazily. For the first time since the asphalt pit, I saw him surrounded by laughter. That same day, I received an email. A woman in Minnesota named Paula Toivonen wrote that she had seen the video and couldn't look away. Paula said she had once kept a Doberman for 13 years, and when he died, she believed she'd never have the strength to love again. But when she saw Scout, she knew her heart had changed its mind. I read the email in silence, then looked at Scout. He was resting his head on a new toy, eyes drowsy, face at peace. I whispered, "Maybe, little one, maybe you've already found your true home." Day by day, Scout grew stronger. The wounds dried, new pink skin stretching where the old had been stripped away. He began to eat more and sleep more deeply, and most of all, his eyes changed. No longer the gaze of a creature waiting to die, but of a survivor learning to trust the future. I remember one afternoon, I wheeled him into the back lot of the clinic to feel the air. Texas sunlight draped gold across his coat. He lifted his head, eyes half shut, soaking in the warmth on his face. A tear slid down my cheek. I remembered that first moment, finding him tarred and discarded like garbage. And now, only 6 days later, he was lifting his head toward the sun. On the 7th night, I leaned close as he curled in his warming kennel and whispered, "You're not just a puppy anymore. You're proof. Proof that even when the dark swallows whole, light can still find its way back. I knew the road ahead would still be long, still lined with scars. But watching him sleep, his tail twitching softly in dreams, I finally understood. Miracles are not fantasies. They are persistent. They are in love. They are the choice to never let go. And I, along with hundreds of strangers now walking beside us, would keep writing that miracle for Scout. The day Scout was strong enough to leave the clinic, I felt joy tangled with ache. Joy because he had survived the pit of black hell, because he had been given another chance. Ache because I knew I would have to let go. From the moment I lifted him out of that asphalt grave, my heart had been bound to his. But love, I realized, isn't about keeping something for yourself. It's about giving it a future. Paula Toivonen flew in from Minnesota to meet Scout. That morning, I stood by the clinic door, Scout in my arms. He had healed so much, new fur patching over scars, brown eyes burning bright. But his body was still thin, his hind legs still bound to the cart. I worried. Would she see him as enough to love? Then Paula walked in, a blonde woman with kind but steady eyes. She knelt straight down before Scout. No hesitation, no pause. Scout studied her, then rested his head gently in her hand. I heard her breath break into a trembling sigh. She whispered, "Hello, sweetheart. I'm here now." I turned away, tears slipping down my face. In that moment I knew Scout had found his family. On the day he left, I held him tight. I bent to his ear and whispered, "You are the smallest warrior I've ever known. Go on, little one. Go to the place you deserve. But never forget. I was here, in every first breath you fought to take." The flight carried him to Minnesota. The next morning, Paula sent me the first photo. Scout sat in his new cart, eyes blazing under a snowy sky. My chest seized, then burst wide open. From a puppy once dismissed as trash, he was now breathing clean winter air in a land waiting to embrace him. The photos kept coming. Scout curled up in warm blankets. Scout rolling through the snow with other dogs. Scout lifts his head into the wind, tail whipping, unstoppable. I looked at each picture through tears and laughter. That fragile pup had become proof of a simple truth. Love can rewrite a destiny. That night, I sat alone in my empty room in Baytown, replaying everything. The moment I thought he was just a trash bag. The moment I tore him free, skin ripping with tar, blood mingling with black pitch. The harsh retches in the night. The hollow eyes are close to extinction. And then, each fragile step forward, the first spoonful of food, the tail twitch in the cart, the curious gaze when Sonny touched noses with him. It all came rushing back, choking me. And I understood. Scout wasn't just a puppy who had been saved. He was a reminder that even in the cruelest world, one small choice, one pause, one open gate, one pair of arms, can alter the course of a life. If I had walked away that day, Scout would be gone. But I stopped. And because of that, today, in faraway Minnesota, a Doberman pup is running across snow, tail wagging, eyes bright, living the life he deserves. As I close this story, I don't hope anyone remembers me. I only hope they remember Scout. Remember those first eyes staring from the asphalt pit. Remember the final light in the Minnesota snow. And someday, when they cross paths with another small soul crying for help, may they not turn away. Scout taught me one thing. Miracles don't fall from the sky. A miracle is when we choose not to give up. A miracle is when we choose love over indifference. And for me, that miracle has a name. Scout. I remember with painful clarity the first time when I mistook him for trash. And I remember just as clearly the last, when I saw him running through the snow, eyes blazing as if he had never known darkness. The contrast steals my breath every time I think of it. Maybe the most heartbreaking part wasn't the tar, or the skin torn away, or the black vomit in the night. The most heartbreaking part was that he cried for 2 days, and everyone turned away. Had I done the same, he would have died in silence, unseen, forgotten. We like to think miracles are grand, but sometimes a miracle is simply stopping, opening a gate, offering a hand. To a small life, that is everything. When I watch a Scout on the snow, I know he doesn't live just for himself. He lives as proof that love can bend fate. And as a reminder that out there, countless Scouts are still waiting for someone to stop. If this story touches your heart, remember this. Don't turn away. Don't tell yourself a life is too small to matter, because 1 second of compassion can mean an entire lifetime for another soul. Have you ever saved a life, a dog, a cat, or even a fallen bird? If you have, share your story. Compassion spreads from the smallest fragments. And if you believe in the power of love, subscribe. So, together, we can keep spreading these quiet, extraordinary miracles. Scout was saved. But out there, countless eyes are still waiting. Let's make sure they don't wait in silence.